Good evening, Facebook. Today is day 9 of my mental health awareness challenge. And today I'm going to be talking about something very important, something also very crucial. As you probably know, I was nominated on this 25-day challenge by my friend Victoria Lawrence. Reverend Lawrence herself was nominated by our own friend Antonia Justin. And the challenge is to do 25 push-ups, which I've said I'm not doing, but then I've been sharing tips on optimal mental health and supporting people with mental health problems, and also for those who have mental health problems, what people can do to remain well and to achieve recovery. So today I'm talking about suicide and mental health, suicide prevention. And today, the reason I'm doing that is because 10th September being the World Suicide Prevention Day, and that's been celebrated across the globe today. So that's why that's the theme that I'll be sharing on. So we all know what suicide is. Suicide occurs when somebody successfully has an intention and they are able to complete the act of taking their lives, dying by that act. And one of the things that is important in order to prevent suicide is this. I think we all need to realize that no matter who you are, we all have a role in suicide prevention. It's not the role of mental health practitioners alone. It's not the role of psychiatrists alone. It's not the role of general practitioners alone. But we all can play a role in making sure that suicide rates go down. Suicide rates are quite significant across the world. We know that 800,000 people kill themselves, die by suicide every year across the globe. We also do know that the rate is usually, when you look at it in terms of seconds, every 40 seconds across the world, somebody takes their life. Somebody dies by suicide every 40 seconds. Think of the fact that I've been on here for the last 2 minutes. So over that period, we've had five 40-second periods. That means that across the globe, since I started speaking to you this evening, about 5 people have died by suicide. That's the implication of that. We also do know that usually the rate across the globe is about 11 people out of 100,000 die by suicide every year, and men are more affected than women. It's also the age group most commonly affected among men are middle-aged men. We have a spike among 40 to 44-year-olds in the UK, for instance. And then, interestingly, which is also worrying, is the fact that the other spike is actually in men who are over 90 years old. And that tells us about loneliness. It tells us about the elderly, looking out for the elderly in our communities. So we know the age group that is affected. What are the other risk factors for suicide? We do know, for instance, that people who have a family history of suicide, maybe a parent who's died by suicide, or a sister, a brother, or a first degree family relative, are actually at a higher risk. We do know that people who have a chronic physical illness, in terms of maybe cancer, in terms of diabetes, in terms of coronary heart disease, in terms of hypertension, osteoporosis, those type of long-term chronic conditions that span over a long period of time, those are people who are also at high risk. And prominently, depression and mental illness are very closely linked with mental illness. In fact, the figures show us that in European countries, when you look at the cohort of people who have successfully died by suicide, 50% of them had depression at the time of death. So that's how closely linked depression is to suicide. So really, if there's something that one can learn about in trying to help others in bringing down suicide rates, is to really know about what depression is, to be able to spot the signs, and to be able to know what to do if you know somebody who is in that situation. And I would like to refer you to the previous videos I've done in the past. About 3 days ago, I did a video on depression and mental health, and that's one that I would like you to refer to, because it says all the details about how to identify the condition. So going back to the issue of suicide, that every one of us has a responsibility. So what are the things that you can do um, as a person to try and prevent suicide? What can you do as an individual? Of course, prominently be on the lookout for other people. Be kind. I think sometimes we don't know what people are going through. It's very important to really show kindness. A smile and hello, a how are things with you? It could really be the difference between somebody taking their lives and staying alive. So let's consciously, intentionally go out of our way to be kind. Sometimes there's so much coldness around, sometimes there's so much apathy. Everybody's too busy getting on with their lives. It's very important that we intentionally look out for other people, and when we see warning signs, to reach out to them. The other thing I think we can do in order to really prevent, to bring down suicide rate and to contribute our own quota, is that we need to address our own misgivings and our own judgments, our own myths and our own misunderstandings about mental illness. A lot of people don't know about mental illness, and because of lack of knowledge, because of ignorance, people tend to be judgmental. And also, we do know, I always say that stigma festers on ignorance and misinformation. So no matter who you are, and this is also a call out to community leaders, to church leaders, to faith leaders, to really make yourself, avail yourself of the information that is now copiously available around about mental illness. The NHS has a very good resource on mental illness. The Royal College of Psychiatrists also have a very good resource. There's also the Mental Health Foundation, where you can really get to educate yourself. So I've talked about the fact that we need to address our own misgivings. We need to address our own prejudices about mental illness and mental health. And we also need to be aware of what mental illness is and the various forms that they can manifest, and particularly depression. Of course, the other thing that we need to do is to consciously build a sense of community. Every single day, try and go out of your way to be consciously, intentionally kind to somebody. And it doesn't have to be somebody that you know. It could just be a stranger on the street, because you never really know when that's going to be the difference for them. So let's come back to a sense of community, wearing a smile, smiling at people, being warm to them, being kind to them, just offering to help rather than leaving people to their own devices. And if you know people who are isolated in your community, it's a good time to reach out to them. It's a good time to really make them feel loved, make them feel warm, make them feel accepted. So we now know what the risk factors for suicide are. We know what we can do to help to basically do our own quota and bring in helping prevent suicide. And of course, the other thing I want to say is, for those who are out there tonight, who are maybe watching this video, and you are struggling with your own suicidal crisis, you are thinking that you are not going to get through this, I want you to know tonight, I just want to tell you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Please don't take your life. You don't need to, because the sun will shine again for you. And what I'm going to ask you to do tonight is that you please reach out. Please call somebody right now. Please pick up the phone and ask somebody for help. The first step in getting help for a suicidal crisis is to confide in somebody. And please do pick up the phone and speak to somebody. Send an email. Just make contact with somebody and let them know what you are going through. And of course, the next step is then to get help. And of course, getting help will be speaking to your GP. And in fact, it's possible that if you are on the brink, one of the things you can do is to actually call the ambulance. If you call the emergency services because you think that if help is not available right now, that you are going to do something that is going to cause pain to others, then please, by all means, pick up the phone and call the emergency services and let them know exactly how you are feeling. And the mental services, for instance, in the UK, run 24 hours. It's 24/7. So at every single point, there's always somebody in mental services, a specialist mental health person, professional, who is on duty and whose role it is to help people who are feeling the way you feel. The other thing you need to do is to get a crisis plan, a safety plan. It's important to to those you confide in, let them know that there are times, that there are risk factors that you suffer with, that there are periods when you can be low, there are periods when you can feel that you're on the brink, and have a plan together about what you can do at such times. Either is to give them a ring, either is to come to their house, whatever it is. It's not a good idea when you're feeling suicidal to be by yourself, because at that point you might not be in control, and you might not be able to resist the urges that you are having. So it's always very important to have a safety plan ahead of time with your friend, with your brother, with your sister, with a family member, with a church member, with somebody from work. Just let somebody know, have a plan in place that when you are feeling that way, you will reach out to them. The other thing is to stay away from drugs and alcohol. Drugs and alcohol are actually highly associated with suicide, and the reason is because when people drink and when people use drugs, it pushes them over the brink. The things that people will usually not be able to do, we call them disinhibition, in terms of the fact that it holds back your guards. It helps you to let go, and sadly enough, letting go might actually then result in suicide, because suddenly somebody would have thought about their families, who would have thought about the impact that that's going to have on others, will suddenly let go of the controls, because they're under the influence of drugs or under the influence of substances. And that's another thing. If you are struggling with any addiction in terms of substances or alcohol, please get help. Your GP is always the first place to go to as well, and there's help available. There are people who have been able to beat addictions, so it's not a life sentence. You can actually beat the addiction. And of course, the final thing is that when you've then emerged from your tunnel, it's always good to share your story of success. Let people know that you've been on the brink before and you've been able to make recovery. And perhaps there are people who are listening to me this evening who have also been on the brink at some point in their lives, and you've made a recovery. It's always good to share your story. It's always good to let people know that there was a time when you were really on the edge, but now things are a lot different for you. So once again, the most important message I want to send out there tonight are two things. One, that it's everyone's business. It's our social responsibility to be engaged in suicide prevention, every one of us. And the second message is that if you're on the brink tonight or at any point in the future, please do remember that there is a future for you and there is light at the end of your tunnel. So please don't give up. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Once again, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for sharing the videos, and thank you for embracing this message.